Hi, this is Craig Calvert. About a week ago, I posted on Facebook an image of the pillars of creation, very much like the one on the right. And I got a lot of comments, and I also had a couple of questions. And one of those questions was, how did I create it? And so I answered by saying that I would create this video. So I captured the image on the left last summer using a one-shot color camera and a dual band filter. And then I processed it in both PixInsight and Photoshop. This is a stacked image of the Eagle Nebula that has undergone background extraction, denoise, and stretching. So now I need to focus in on the central core of the Eagle Nebula. So I rotated it by 60 degrees and then cropped it with dynamic crop. And I did a deconvolution, accentuated some features. And then I remove the stars and I keep the star mask so that I can add it in later. But I didn't particularly like the stars in this star mask. They're quite blue, but also notice they are elongated from southwest to northeast. But I was able to correct it using a technique that I came up with that also uses PixInsight and Photoshop. And you can see if I can get these things together there. Let's see. Okay, there you go. Now you can see that they are much more round. I also reduced the number of stars, and they're a little less blue at least. And so I'm going to actually use that version of the star mask when I add it back in at the very end. Now you can ask the question, how did I create this? And that's a fair question. It's not the purpose of this talk, but if you go to my channel, you can see this called Transforming Elongated Stars to Round Stars using PixInsight and Photoshop. And you can look at that and see if it might help you if you have the same problem. So what we're going to work with is that image, this image here, and again, we'll add the stars back at the very end. So I'm going to make a duplicate of this image, and I'm going to go to another workspace and continue with the process. Well, the first thing I want to do is to make the red a little more orange because I want to. Now, you don't have to. You can make it do whatever you want. But there's a process here that can transform the red into a little more orange using pixel math. And it's not a new technique. It's one that's been around for a while. You first have to extract the RGB channels. And that's what I just did. And you can see that it's very bright, the red, as you might expect, because it's predominantly red. But there is some blue and green. You can see, particularly around the pillars, you can see some brightness. So you do have some blue and green colors. And in fact, it's not, if you look at a very red image from a Mission Nebula and you see some of this lighter color, that's likely where you're going to find your blue-green color. So how am I going to make this more orange? It's like painting. I'm going to make a new red channel. And I'm going to make a new red channel that has a little bit of green in it. So I add a little green to it. I make a green with a little bit of red in it. And I'm going to leave the blue alone. And when you do that using pixel math, this isn't a new technique. This is on the internet. You can find it. I've already done the equations. And I'm using a coefficient of 75% red plus 25% green for my new red channel. And I experimented a little bit with those coefficients, and this was the one I liked the best. A little too much green, it came out looking brown. A little too much, not enough green, and it's still too red. So 75-25 was a good ratio, I think, for this purpose. Green, just the opposite. There's 25% red and 75% green. And then for blue, again, I said I just left it alone. And I created a new image called New RGB, and there it is. Now, it looks a little brown, but you can see maybe a hint of orangey colors in it, particularly where it's a bit brighter, like right in that area. One of the things you need to be careful with these in this process is to keep the noise down. So I used easy denoise. You can use whatever you want to reduce noise in that image, and then I stretched it to get to this point. And you can now, I think you can see some of the orange colors coming out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to put it on another workspace. So let's look at where we are and where we kind of want to get to. Now it's a matter of trying to manipulate the colors more locally. I want to put more blues, for example, around where the pillars are. And to do this, we're going to use masks. Not just the normal kind of masks you might use, but we're actually going to use the RGB channels themselves as masks. And the first one we're going to extract is the blue channel because it is the weakest color. Now, you can have to be, again, I mentioned you have to be careful about noise. If you take a mask that is noisy and you apply it to an image and then you do something, all you're doing is introducing noise into that image. So you want to try to make sure this is clean, and you can use whatever process you want. This one worked well for me, and it's quick and dirty, and for this video it's great. So I just used the TGV denoise. Just didn't mess around at all with the parameters. I just applied it, and you can see here. Here we go. It did a pretty good job cleaning it up. Use whatever technique you want, but the point is, it needs to be pretty clean of noise. The other thing is that though you can see where the blues are, you might want to intensify them. Remember, this is a mask. If I want to push blues out a little bit, like where I'm pointing to up here, I need to intensify the signal, the blue signal. I need to make it a little more bright. To do that, I'll take the curves transformation. You can do this with histogram also, but I'm using the curves transformation. And I'm going to, if I push the RGB up, curve up, you can see it brightens quite a bit. But it also brightens right around the pillars, which I don't want it too bright because then I'm going to wash it out. So how do I come up with a compromise? Well, it's a trick that I use that maybe you've done also. Put more than one handle on this curve. So I put two and move them separately, and you have a little more control as to how to make the adjustments so that you can push the blues out, but you don't necessarily have it too bright around the pillars. You want it kind of a similar brightness, in my opinion anyway. So I can play with it a little bit with these two handles until I get it, that's pretty good. So you can see that it's not too bright around the pillar. I'm going to apply it. And then I will, okay, I'll use it as a mask. There we go. And first thing I want to do, I don't want to just add blue, because if I add blue, I'm just going to add more color. I want to subtract some of the color that's there. And the big one, of course, is red. So I'm going to remove quite a bit of red. And you can see it comes up a bit green. So I'm going to remove a little bit of green also. And see where that goes. All right. It's starting to look a little blue. You can see that. I want to enhance. Now I can enhance the blue. I've reduced the colors quite a bit. Enhance the blue some. I still don't want it too bright around that pillar, so maybe I'll just reduce lightness slightly. Okay, so what I've done now is you can see how I've changed it to where I've added blue. That's the first step. Now what we're going to do is take the next color, and that would be green. Okay, and we're going to then do red and so on. I'm going to speed this up, process up a little bit so that it doesn't drag on. So now I'm doing the green, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of brighten it a little bit. Two handles, not too much around the pillars. There we go. Good enough. I'm going to then take it and I'm going to apply it as a mask. This is the green mask. Let's change that back. Okay, now I'm going to again reduce red first. And I can start to see some yellows coming out. Can you see that? Increase green and maybe increase blue a little bit. Okay. And I'll put two handles on red because I don't want it in the center, but I want it more on the outside. So I can have a little more control on where I put it that way, or remove it in this case. Same thing with the green. A couple of handles on it. A little more control. And blue, same thing. I don't want it too much on the outside, but I want it in where the core is. And then again, let's push down lightness a bit. Okay, now let's do red. So look how washed out red is now. I want to brighten it up just a little bit. It's pretty washed out. We removed so much of it. So now let's add some of it back. And so again, I'm going to probably want to do 2 handles here because I want to put more of it, the red out where it's darker and less in where it's brighter around the pillars themselves. And I'll do the green as well while I'm there, and the blue. Notice I didn't necessarily just now decrease blue and green. I actually increased blue. Okay, so now I'm going to take the masks off, and I'm going to adjust it without masks on. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is contrast, and this is the RGB, 2 handles up in the middle, down at the bottom. And you can see how it affects the contrast. You don't want to put too much contrast in, but and you can do the same with the colors as we've been doing, and just manipulate it like this until you like the way it looks, or you like the way where it's getting to. At least it's not certainly far from a finished product. So we want to keep it so that we have the blues in the middle, the reds on the outside. A little bit of yellow in there, not too bright around the pillars. Okay, now let's, I'm going to adjust the red a little bit. I think there's too much. So I'm going to extract the red mask and apply it, and I'm going to reduce the saturation a little bit. Now we're going to repeat this process again. Let me start with blue. I'm not going to do all of these. I'm going to speed it up somewhat, and then you'll see a final product in the end. Again, just the mask and so on. And then I did green, I did the red, and this is where I ended up. And now I took the masks off. I'm again adjusting contrast with the RGB curve a little bit to my liking. This is where I said this is an iterative process. It's not a cookbook. So I made a few more of these iterations. So now it's time to save this image so that I can bring it into Photoshop. And I'm going to save it as a TIFF file, and I'm going to change it to 16-bit because that's what's required for Photoshop. And then I'll open up Photoshop, and I'll open the file. There it is. And there you go. And now there's a lot of tools in Photoshop. I can't possibly show you all the tools. The first set of tools actually I'm going to show you is under the filter, and it's called the Camera Raw filter. Under basic, I can brighten it or make it brighter if I like. Contrast, I can add contrast or remove contrast. Now if you speed up the process, it goes really, really fast. Anyway, you do it until you're satisfied, and that's good. Okay, I'm happy. There's another tool that I find very useful, and it's under select, and it's a color mask. And I like this because you can choose an area, any area, and it's an area, and it'll use the color of that area, and fuzziness will say how much of it you want to capture. And then hit OK. And I'm going to make this a little more blue, this area a little more blue than it is. But notice there's a lot of area that's included that I don't want. A lot. So hopefully this little loop thing it's called a lasso tool. There's subtraction and addition. I'm going to go to subtraction. I'm going to remove some of this. Okay, see, I'm going to remove areas I don't want to do any changes to. Okay, around the pillar. Let's not do around the pillars either. So I'm mostly doing around in this general area here where you see sort of a dull blue. Now you can go under adjustments, and there's 3 things: brightness, contrast, vibrance, and this thing called color balance. So you can increase the cyans at the expense of the reds, for example. The same with the magentas and the greens, and also with the yellows and the blues. And you can slide these around. There's also shadows, midtones, and highlights you can play with. They'll show some differences. And you do that until you're happy. And then there's by the way, I just hit Control H, which hides it, which makes it easier to see, by the way. It's still there, but it makes it easier to see. You can try brightness contrast to see if that makes a difference. Do vibrance and saturation. And then when you're happy, when you're content with what you've just done, You can click on OK. I'm going to lasso an area that's kind of around this area that to me is too much of an abrupt yellow to blue kind of boundary. And I'm going to go to this blur filter and surface blur and change the radius until it blurs it out. And then deselect, and there you go. Okay, so those are two tools I just showed you. The selecting a color area and then the lasso tool to do some blurring. There are several little tools down here where it's called dot, dot, dot. Lots and lots of tools. And the ones I want to focus on are these tools here, which include blur, sharpen, dodge, which is to lighten, burn, which is to darken, and sponge, which increases and decreases saturation. So let me show you how they work. I'm going to start with the burn tool. And if you go up here, you can see there's midtones, shadows, and highlights. I'm going to go midtones. And you can adjust the intensity of what you're doing. I think for this one, I want to do close to 20%. Okay. And then you have the size of the tool also. I'm going to do this stellar spire here, and I'm going to darken it a bit. So I'll make sure it's small enough of a tool so I don't overlap too much, and just slide it around, and it's like coloring, except you're darkening. There you go. And I do that so that it highlights it, so that it pops out a little more. Another tool, dodge, does the opposite. It lightens. And again, the similar kind of things. I'm making this very small. I'm going to highlight the very edge of it to try to bring it out again a little bit more. There you go. You have to be careful. It's like painting, and painting with a mouse isn't always that easy. Okay. So now I'm going to go to saturation, the sponge tool. I'm going to saturate, and I'm going to do the same area. And yeah, I don't want it that much. Okay. And now I'm going to saturate it, make it a little bit more orangey than it was before. You see that? I could do it in other areas too. Any of these, for example, I want to do all of these areas that are kind of highlighting on the edges. I'm cleaning up in here. And I can also change the size of it and actually make a big swath. For example, if I want to highlight this whole area. What I'm doing is I'm bringing out the oranges. I'm saturating it more. Okay. Now let's go to desaturate. And what I want to do is I want to desaturate. I'm going to get a little bit of the blues out, a little more gray. It's going to actually darken it a little bit, just slightly though. Again, to highlight it somewhat. Okay. If I want to darken it a little more, I can go to the burn tool again. I'll burn it a little bit. That's good. I'm sharpening. This is a sharpen tool. I generally do it along the edges of some of these features, like what I just did over here. Blur tool is great for removing noise, localized noise. For example, I don't know if you can see this noise here. There's a lot of noise. And I can blur. I need to blur it out. Now, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to speed this process up. I'm going to keep doing it, keep editing using those same tools you just saw. And I'm not going to talk. I'll play a little music. Okay, now I'm going to save it. And go back into PixInsight. Now load it into PixInsight. Now I'm back to the normal speed, by the way. You can see what Adobe Photoshop did, made quite a difference. So now last step we got to do is use pixel math to add the stars back. So it's just a simple process of adding the two images together, the one we just created, plus the star, I think we call it new star image. And I'll just drop it onto it, and there you go. Okay, well, that's it. I hope I clearly demonstrated that you can create very colorful images from one-shot color cameras, and images that, to some degree at least, honor the natural beauty of the nebula. Until next time, thanks.